It looks like it's time again for us to learn some more FileMaker. An exciting lesson today. My name is Matt Petrowski, and in this lesson, we're going to be taking a look at filtering list views. So stick with me, we'll be on my desktop in just a few. All right, so what do we have for today? Today we've got filtering list views. Of course, if you found this video as a result of a search that you were looking for or clicked on it as a video you saw on the side, browsing, however you got here, if you see that this is video 16 and you'd like to go back to video 1, click on the channel icon below. That'll take you to the list of all of the different series of videos that I've been doing. This is series number 4. Also, in the description, you click on the Show More, which is probably underneath, somewhere down underneath this video, and you will be able to access the file that we're going to be using in this exact video. So as I zoom in right here and I open up my database, yours will not be called Time Track Matt, but it will look exactly the same. We're going to take a look at what we're going to be doing today, which is filtering our list view. And I'll check off screen really quickly here, take a look at my stream feed. Looks like it's coming in good. All right. So if you noticed from the previous video that we did yesterday, there's a little icon that I put right here. And just a few videos ago, what we had were these iOS-looking switches. As I click on this, clearly this is a Popover widget. I've made it so that it has no borders and it blends into my header area. And that's because, as I've stated in previous videos, one of my goals is not to clutter, and should be your goal as well, not to clutter the user interface with items and objects that are of low frequency use. And every item that I see in my user interface, such as these, I ask the question, how often is the user going to need to either reference or use this? If it's low, then we want to put it away, we want to hide it, still make it accessible, and then progressively disclose it, that's what they're calling it in UX these days, in order to show the user, here are your additional options. So clearly, when I am making a selection right here, or maybe not clearly, my hope would be that a user would recognize this icon as the icon for settings. Because it's relative to this particular selection, when I get here, of course, I can provide whatever information I want. Now this, I haven't even cleaned this area up. I'm going to want to give this clearly more border around here. I'll probably spend some time arranging this. This, at the state that it is, was just get the popover on the layout, throw it in, hook it up and wire it up. Then I come back later and I focus on cleaning it up. But what we have here are two items that I copied from another database that I have. In fact, I copied it. If we go into layout mode and I show the manage layouts, and the very top layout here is the theme layout right here. When you open this, you will see that in this theme, which you can get other themes if you'd like this, other colors. As I scroll over to the side and scroll down, you can see that right here in the theme was an iOS switch. Now this has been set up for a previous database that I had worked on, and I need to actually change this so that it's going to work with my database, and we're going to take a look at that just after this message.
This video has been brought to you by FileMakerThemes.com. It's a one-stop shop for choosing a theme to apply to your new or existing FileMaker solution. When considering your next move toward advancing the look and feel of your FileMaker solution, don't forget to visit FileMakerThemes.com.
All right, and we're back. So I'm going to close this, and we're going to go work with the items that we have in the actual popover. You can see that what they are is these are button bar objects. When I select them, you can see that clearly I've made the object the size of the intended display, but within this object there are two segments. There's the segment above and there's the segment below. So I'm not really using this as a button bar. I'm using a trick in order to only hide or show a given segment based on hide calculation settings. And you can see within here that I've got the on version and the off version. Now there's so many ways that you can use this. You can use this based on the value of something that is stored within a, let me turn off my phone there. You can use something that's stored within a global field, but you can also use something stored within a global variable, and that's my preference. So when we select on these, and I'm going to zoom out here and put my inspector relative to this, we are going to be in this area of the inspector, the data tab, and we're going to be using, I'll just hide that one right there and bring it right so we can see everything centered on screen. So this hide object when, you can see that when I select on the first segment, it says hide object when new videos only. So this again is Boolean logic, but we're taking advantage of the fact that FileMaker does not have to have something be so explicit that FileMaker automatically knows whether something is true or false. We've seen this in many other videos. When we click on the calculation, we can see down at the bottom, we read this, and as a FileMaker developer, we say anything that's non-zero values are true. Anything that is only 0 or empty is considered false. So in that regard, I don't have to do this. I don't have to say new videos only equals 1. I don't have to have that additional piece of information. I can simply just say if there's anything positive in this global variable of new videos only, then this will evaluate as true. Now when we select the next segment, we can see that it says not new videos only. Now this variable was for when I had used this in a completely different database. I put it into the theme. I need to account for this is now something specific to my database. So I'm going to need to rename this. This makes no sense here. It was copied and pasted. So I'm going to select and change this from new videos only to simply omit invoiced. And then I will select all of that, copy it, go to the next one, and just paste back here. Take off my double dollar signs. Don't want to have 4 there. So now the buttons are going to hide or show based on that value, but both of these are still a button, so we need to make sure that they do something. So I am going to copy this global variable, and I'm going to double click on the button in order to bring up the settings. There we go, button bar setup. And I can see down here, I'm going to zoom out a little bit more and move this up. Video was trying to freak out there. We are currently using a single step. Now, I am using a trick to accomplish this. And this is one of the reasons why I chose to use a global variable instead of a global field. And remember, global fields are local to the client. When this database opens off a FileMaker server, every person who's connected to the same database, when it's hosted, has a different global field value or a different global variable field. With global variables, what I'm able to do is use this one single step of refresh object. Now, why would I want to use refresh object? Well, the reason is this object right here is going to change its hide calculation, or it's going to change which segment is going to show. So one is going to hide and the other is going to show, and it will flip back and forth. And I'm going to use the refresh object in order to do that. Now, normally you might think I need to use the set variable step, and yes, you would, but then you don't get the advantage of using the refresh step in order to cause the user interface to refresh. So notice that inside of the calculation for the refresh step, we're taking advantage of the let function in order to control the contents of what's in a global variable. So I'm going to need to modify this because, as I had copied on my clipboard, I have a different variable that I want to use, which is the omit invoiced. And I'll change that right there. And this is also, I forgot what this is called, but we can go get it really quickly. I'm going to need to come back into this really quickly because I need to. Now, here's the key thing about naming objects. Notice I'm going to go to the first tab, the position tab, and when I am selected on this button bar, I'm selected on a segment. If I click on this segment, notice that there is no name for this object. But if I click off of the object and then click the first click, notice that it does have a name right here of bar new videos. Well, I need to rename that one as well. So this one's going to be omit invoice. I just follow the same system that I do with anything else. Emit invoiced is the variable name. Emit invoiced is going to be the name of the object. So I'm going to copy that, and I need to now go change that button. So I'll double click the button, go click on that refresh, and I need to modify my calculation here so that it is referencing what object do I need to refresh. I need to refresh the bar omitted invoiced after you have used a let function to change what's stored in the global variable from omit invoice to whatever it currently is to not the inverse of that, switching a 1 to a 0 and a 0 to a 1. And all I have to do is copy that. And then I will say, let's see if I can make this a little bit smaller while I'm here. I can indeed, which is nice. I need to do it not on just that button, but on the other button as well. I can either click here or I can click the advance and move to the next one. We can see there is a refreshed video as well. Let's hide those steps. And we will just, I should be able to just paste right in here and say OK. Now I'm going to copy, actually, let's go ahead. We've got to do this other one, exclude start times as well. So I'm going to do that really quickly. I've already named the object of exclude starts. I'm going to double click here. And we'll do this really quickly. I will hide that step. I'll click to specify, change this one to new exclude starts, and I'll just use the same thing. Exclude starts. And once I've typed it in once, that's all I ever need to type it in again. I'll select all of that. Copy, you can see that it'll be pretty quick. Advance to the next one. Click on the refresh there. Click on that one. Select all, paste it in. It's the same calculation on both segments. And I just need to do one more thing on the button bar here. I have the hide calculation to update for this one because it again was a copied object from new videos. So we will now just select and paste that whole thing in there because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, what was it actually? Let me cancel that. It is the positive that I want. So let's put that one and we'll put the positive one or the one that will have a value. And I'll just copy that and I'll select on the next one and I will put not and paste that. All right. We should be good. You should be able to now go into browse mode if you've been following along, and we should be able to get each one of these working independently, where formerly they were not working independently. And using FileMaker Advanced, we're going to go into the data viewer. We are going to look at our current variables that are currently loaded into memory. And we're going to see we've got, this one was established because it had existed before. This would not be used or will not exist if I either cleared it or close this file down and reopen this file. This variable, because it's now no longer associated to any objects in my interface, would not actually appear. Just these two, emit invoiced and exclude starts. And I should be able to click over here and notice they will switch between 0 and 1. Each time that I click those, they are being controlled. So we now have some settings that allow us to control our script to determine what is going to happen when we make our selection from our pop-up based on our user preferences. The only thing that's not going to happen in this database currently is that these values will not persist. In other words, if I close this file down, and let's go ahead and close it down, and we will come back and go to my open recent, and time track mat should open right up. You can see that no variables exist currently. As soon as I open this and click one of them, it will create that one and it'll create the other one. And now that new videos no longer exist. That variable doesn't exist. So what if I wanted to save these preferences? Because in a FileMaker solution, we always want to save what the user has decided to have as preferences. We are going to save these into the user table in their preferences field. If you remember from the data and structure part of our lesson, in our relationship graph, on startup, we have a table called users. That users table, when we look at the users table, I'll double click here, it has a field called preferences. So I don't have it in this database, but it's a future lesson that we'll take a look at. I will take all of the different variables that I know I want to save what is specific to what preference a user has stored and push them into this field. And that's how I will save my preferences based on what a user prefers to do. So if I come in and I have this setting where I want to omit the invoiced and I do want to see the start times, then that's what will be saved for me. Otherwise, for a different user, completely different value. So let's take a look at the script. Now, the easiest way whenever we want to see what script is going to be fired is we know that we're going to either hover over this and see that the script is on object save load times, or I can double click, or excuse me, command double click. On Windows, it's probably control double click, and I can bring up the on object save. There's my script. There's two ways that I could have gotten to this script. I could have opened the script manager or the script workspace and just found it by filtering, or I can select right here and I can simply click to edit right within this user interface and it'll bring me right into the script. So whichever way is comfortable for you. I usually open the scripts and just go do the find, because when you're working within the scripts and building things, it's a little bit easier. So let's take a look at that. Let's cancel out of these dialogues. And we will open up the scripts, and I will just put in the, it has the word load. And there, we're in there really quickly. And it's a little bit easier to work within the scripting workspace in this fashion. All right, so we have two variables that we now need to account for. Let's just go ahead and set those in, or what's the best way to do this? I am doing this live, so on error capture, we are going to be performing a restore. Let's see, we've got our find records. So here's where we're going to need to take into account some conditions. We are using the search criteria of whatever the selected project is, so that's perfect. The one thing that we don't have in FileMaker is FileMaker, because it's coming from a long lineage of development going all the way back to the 90s, FileMaker doesn't change things where those changes would impact databases that are currently in use. So they don't just come in and change the way that a perform find works, although it would be nice where a perform find could vary its criteria based on a number of different attributes. So what we have to do is we have to put in if conditions. So we're going to have to put in if, and we're going to put in our double $, omit invoiced. And I'm just going to select both of those, and I'm going to hit Command or Control D to duplicate them. I will open up the omit invoiced, and what did I say the other one? I think it was exclude. And here is a good piece of advice. I'm just going to leave it at exclude right there, because this is so common to do this. If you try to operate from memory, sometimes you cause yourself more problems than it's worth. And sometimes it's more worth it just to go to the user interface and select what the setting is. So let's reveal that, and we'll select right here. I know the variable is right there for me to copy. So if I copy it from here, from the first time that I type it in, if I copy, copying is more consistent than trying to type. And remember, because I might have forgotten, I might have made it singular as opposed to plural. But now that I copy this, I can just come in here and paste it. So now with that paste, I know it's the same wherever it is. So our script, omit invoiced. First, let's put the data in a state where we can do that type of find. Let's find all. We're in list view. Let's say that's invoiced, and that one's invoiced, and that one is invoiced. So what we want the find to do is we want the find to modify its criteria, and we are going to be performing multiple finds in order to do that. The difficulty that we have right here is what we're doing is we're creating a matrix of options. And if you've never come across this before, this can get pretty confusing, because if I have two switches right now, and let's say I add a third switch, I don't know exactly what the math is. I know it's not factoring, but basically the multiple different combinations, once you increase the number of options, increases such that my script would continue to grow and grow and grow and grow. And I'll have to think about that when I'm not doing this live. I've done it before in terms of what's a better approach than having multiple different ifs, but we'll solve it while we're here recording the video. But just recognize that if I added a third option, for those of you that are math geniuses, put it in the YouTube comments of whatever it is that you're doing there when you add the number of options to what the math is. I forget what the term is. It gets pretty convoluted. So we always want to try to think about a better way to approach this than having to account for all of the different possible variations. And many times that's building a custom find, which is probably better in this scenario than using multiple performs. Actually, let's do that. Let's do something that's better. Here's what's best, probably. We always know that we're going to search for the given records within a given project. And that's exactly what this perform find is doing right now. It is finding all of a given project. Within FileMaker, there's two ways that we could approach this. We could approach trying to create a script where that script will programmatically build up all of the options, create the find, and then execute the find. And that's probably the better approach than using multiple perform finds restore. We will end up using multiple finds, and for FileMaker, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Just remember, whenever we're considering performance, you have to reflect on what is happening as part of the logic of your script. What I'm trying to explain here is that if I perform multiple finds, in other words, if I perform my find here, I've already done one request, one find that's gone to server, ask server, say find all the projects and return the found set. Then I'm going to modify that find where I can do this, modify last find. So now I'm doing two finds. Then I would end up doing three finds. So I'm doing three operations where it might be better for me to take the time to write this script and say, let's just collect all of the data that we want and build one find that goes into find mode and then builds it out. But it really depends on what you're doing, whether the fields are indexed, and whether you're lazy, actually. So I can do this right here. I can say, perform the find for the projects, and then if omit invoiced is true, I can modify the last find. And in that regard, we've gone into find mode, and I would now set field of the invoiced. Oh, in this one, I had it named build. In a previous video, I renamed that to invoice, and I should rename that, but I didn't rename it in this file. We'll set build to true. And then we can we'll get away with two requests in this, which will actually work really well. We will duplicate this. Problem is, if they don't have omit invoiced, but they do have exclude starts, then what we're going to do is we are going to we'd have to modify the find again. Because if they didn't have the omit invoiced, then that would be a problem, because it wouldn't go into modify last find. Actually, the better way to approach this is, let's put another, let's end if right here. This is the better way. Or, and we'll put the exclude starts. Got to get that one. Exclude starts, and I did that from memory. We are going to put so that we only have one modified find. Then within this, instead of having two modified finds, we will do this right here. And we could do this in the form of an else if. I'll just keep two. We'll talk about ifs and else ifs right here. And we need to change this one. This one is going to be a pretty unique find. We're going to exclude the starts. The starts is, what are the starts on? It's the type right there. And I forget, I think starts are 0 and stops are 1. I believe that's the case. So let's go ahead and set that right there. So that should be the operation that we want. So let's look at this. Let's think about what we've done. First off, as soon as they make a selection from the popover is going to initiate the script. The script is going to come in. We're going to run an error capture. We are going to capture our search criteria of the ID from the global field that is the selected project. We're going to perform one find, which is going to execute looking for all of that given project. Then we're going to say if omit invoiced or exclude starts. Now we have to think, while we're programming, what is possible given that we've made some selections in the past? Well, we have selected on a given project where that project is It exists, but it doesn't have any start and stop times. So does it make sense at this stage to go through and modify the last find? It doesn't make sense. So we have to think about that when we're scripting. We have to think about all of the different possible variations, or as many as we can, and address that. So I'm going to say right here, I'm going to add some criteria in this, and this is where things start to get a little bit complex, but it's not too hard. We are going to say it's going to deal with the found count. In other words, did you find something? If you did find something and omitted, invoiced, or exclude starts. So if we have either of those options set, then we want to modify the last find. So this is very important right here, that we have to remember that it's possible that we have a zero found set. And if we have a zero found set, there is no point in executing all of these steps. You must think about and test your user interface when you do things. And again, I'm doing this live, so we'll get to test it and see what happens. If get found count, meaning if that's not a zero, and there is no empty for a found count, it's either zero or however many it found, all values beyond zero are positive. So if we have a positive and we have a positive here or a positive thing here, then what we want to do is we want to modify the last find, which we know is the find for the project. And if it's the omit invoice is checked, we want to set that field to 1. If the exclude starts is checked, then we want to set that field to 0. And we need to omit on this one. Omit record right there. So we'll need to omit those starts. And after the end of all of that, after these, we are going to perform our find. And that should work right there. Let's give it a little bit of space in between, and then let's see what happens. Let's see if we've done a good job of accounting for all of our different settings. We'll go in and we will test our user interface. Yeah, we still got a good stream here. All right, so we are omitting invoiced. We are not excluding start times. Let's see how that one works out. Let's choose project number 7. We have, it flipped. We omitted the invoice. We wanted to omit invoice. So we need to flip what we're doing in terms of this, because we are getting invoice. So it's working. Our script is doing what we want it to do. It's finding just invoiced. We just need to flip that. So let's go flip it in our script. So let's duplicate this one. We could do this in one of two ways. It looks like one is start or one is end on this build value, or I could have set 0, but we're going to omit those. When I say there's two ways I could have done this, if I want to save myself a script step, sometimes when I'm dealing with a Boolean, rather than having this omit the record, which I believe omit is going to perform in that find, it's going to do it, we'll watch it in debugger, then I could have put this at 0. But since I know that, the one thing you'd have to do in this regard, if I say set the build field to be equal to 0, looking for 0 records for invoiced, I would have to know that my field of build is by default putting in a value, because a value when you're searching for 0 versus empty is two different things. So let's go take a look at our defined database and we'll look at our build field. We can see right here that there is no auto enter on the build. There's nothing that this field is defaulting to other than empty. So in this regard, that could potentially give me some false results that I'm not expecting. So this is a point where I make the decision, oh, I want the build field to always have a value. And in that regard, I'm either going to use data, the shortcut, or what's no different, use the calculated value of 0 as my default value. So now I would know that I could search for 0 and not have to put that omit step. And we will not, we will leave that checked because we don't want that to automatically be entered once the user has checked this value. And I'm going to take the opportunity to rename this too. Here in this one, you should do the same. Invoiced, and we'll change that right there. All right, so let's see if that works, and let's see if it works using the debugger. This is what's super helpful when you are going to watch what's happening as a result of your script. So we're going to zoom in here, show the debugger so that we can see it nice and big on screen, and we're going to make our selection of project 7. It's going to go in and we will see what happens. This is what I love about FileMaker. So we set our criteria. It captured the ID. We performed the restore. It found the invoiced and the non-invoiced. We did get a found count. We have 12 records, in fact, and we know that omit invoiced is a switched value. So we modify the last find, so it went into find mode. And here you can see this setting right here of matching records, include or omit. So when you want to make a request where you want to omit records, you're going to select this option. We'll see if it happens, but the difficulty that we're going to get is, and I may not be able to finish this script up until tomorrow, real time here, we're going to, I didn't save the script. We need to get out of this, go into browse mode, and I need to save the script. See that right there? I knew that my omit step was not added because the script had not been saved. So Command S, Control S. Now we go back to the debugger and take a look at that. Let's open the debugger there. All right, that's open. Now we switch to project 7. We're getting a little bit of debugging in this video too. So we perform our find, and so modify our last find. Here, the problem that it's going to be is that we currently have a request that says, give us all of the records for this particular ID. And this is where it won't work in this regard when we omit a record, because if we set our field to invoiced, which it checked right there in find mode, and we set this to omit, the problem that we have now is we are creating a request that is going to omit all project 7s that are checked for invoiced, which is basically probably going to give us the whole other set of all other records from all other projects, if I'm not mistaken. So we have to, this is FileMaker debugging. This is basically debugging your script. And look at that. We've got mixed records, 11 out of 14, and I'm willing to bet that out of all of these records, they are from all the other projects except for project 7. So we go back to the drawing board and we have to go modify our script. So in this case, when we modify the last find, what we want to do is, if we're going to ever use an omit, what we're doing is a multi-request query. So we are going to modify the last find, but we're going to create a new record request because we know that each of these requests are going to omit whatever they find out of the requests. So this, we want to make sure that we still find all of that given project. So let's save that, and now let's run it again. We go to our tools, we go to our debugger, we switch right here, we go to our project 7, we step through all of these. I'm doing this one right here, this step into F6 is what I'm hitting on my keyboard. And we can see that the original request right here, we have a total of 2 requests. The original request right here is the positive request that is going to find my records. And we can see that this second request is currently set to include, but we're going to see that it's going to set the field to exclude, and then we are going to omit that record. So now we have a valid request. We are requesting all positive records for project ID 7, and out of that we are omitting anything that is currently invoiced. Let's see if we get our results. There we go. We've got 9 out of the 14, and if we got a found count, we do as our view as list, and we'll zoom out here and see that this is working because we will test our data. So let's go and we will untoggle our omit invoiced. We'll switch to project 7. That will bring up all of them. We can see that we've got 12 out of 14. My result was 9. If I check one more of these and go in, check this, and select again, I should get 8. Boom. There we go. My script is doing what I want it to do, at least with regards to the omitting of invoiced records. Now, what about the exclude as starts? Well, I just showed you how to do that with the omit as invoice, so I'm going to leave you with this for today, and I'm going to let you test and debug the same thing, hook it up, and make sure that it gives you the results that you want by excluding all of the start times as well, meaning any record that does not have a timestamp or a time value in it. That means that that's a start time, and the end time is this value right here. We'll get to our questions, so if you've had any questions throughout the course of today's lesson, then we'll take a look at that, and we will wrap this video up. We'll make sure that this script works. If you want to wait for this file, you can. Tomorrow's lesson will probably, I'll make that available. Tomorrow is also going to be Question Friday. So if you have FileMaker questions, you can send them to editor@filemakermagazine.com, or you can post them onto the YouTube videos. I will capture them there, and we will take a look at that point in time. So let's switch over to our questions and see if we have anything that came in here. I know that I've got my questions on the side. They are loaded right there from before. Looks like we don't have too many that came in today. Here's a question. Question, would you store preferences in repeating fields or separate fields? Is there a more advantageous option? Good question on that, Jean-Pierre. That really depends on what you prefer. From a data standpoint, storing 375 kilobytes of data in one field versus storing it into multiple fields is really no different as far as FileMaker is concerned. FileMaker doesn't care. Data is like water. How you store it and where you store it is what is up to you and what you prefer to structure. I prefer to store, for example, user preferences. I prefer to store all of the user preferences, most of them as global variables that I then just put into one single field called preferences. And then when the database loads up, all I have to do is take the contents out of that one field and then just evaluate that one field of all of the different global variables, and instantly all of the preferences that that user had set in the global variables prior, they're just instantly loaded into memory. So to me, that's a little bit more of an efficient way. But to some other developers, they prefer to maybe create a dedicated preferences table. Whereas in the solution that we have right here, when we take a look at the solution, I am using a table, or excuse me, a single field within the users table. So within this users, if I'm storing all of my user preferences in one field, I don't get as many of the benefits that I might get as opposed to going into the tables and creating a dedicated preferences table. So that just really boils down to how complex is your FileMaker solution. If you have a bunch of different preferences in a bunch of different areas within your solution, let's say your solution is really big and it's broken up into like 25 different departments or 25 different areas, I would probably prefer to create a preferences table and then start to manage those preferences, because inevitably what's going to happen is some of those preferences are going to need to be exposed within the user interface. And if that's the case, then it's probably more beneficial to manage them in the table, because I'll be able to expose them via layouts. Whereas if it's just a simple tool like this particular database, and I'm just going to have a few preferences here and there based on this tool just deals with time tracking and that's it, I'm going to opt for the let's just use a single field method for my preferences. Again, it always boils down to how are you managing the data in your solution and how big is your solution. So let's switch back over to those, see if we had any more questions that came in. Comment. Hey, Zabadil, toughest lecture. Yeah, this is a pretty, if you need to rewatch this video, go ahead and rewatch it. But there's a lot of good learning within this in terms of how to build in complexity into your solution where things look really simple. We want to be able to provide these options when we filter the list view of when I select my project, do I need to see invoiced or not? Do I need to see the start times when all I care about are the end times? And giving those options, we have to know how to script those things. So here we go. Question, what is your opinion using this technique with large data sets, i.e. 5,000 records? Good question. FileMaker's find is extremely fast. It's very, very fast in order to do things. what this comes down to typically is if you know in a found set that found set of data is what the user is probably going to be working within. For example, here in my solution, if I make the selection here on project 7, or I've already done a query, and I know that the user has scrolled down and loaded these records, the local cache probably has a set of results wherein modifying that set of results to a smaller subset is probably pretty easy to do. As opposed to if I have 10,000 records and I know that a fraction of those are loaded, and FileMaker is going to go to the server, do the request, and have to bring some of the results back, especially as the user scrolls, then I'm going to do my best to wind everything up and to make it just a single request, a single query request that I can go tell the server to go get those results and then return them back. I'm probably not going to necessarily do this multiple find where I have one find here and then I have another find and I'm going to modify this. You typically want to narrow it down to as few number of steps as possible. And it is possible to script this. It's just doing it live, thinking about the best, because I have to sit here and think about it. What's the best way to do this? I'll probably modify this script right after I end the video, and then that's what'll be available. I'll save these steps and put that underneath for the file that I supply in the next video in terms of what's an even more efficient way to do this with data. Also, one thing to remember is when you're going to consider a large data set, we have not gotten into this, and it is an advanced FileMaker developer technique, but always remember and be willing to understand and learn about perform script on server. If you can have things that are complex happen on the server, you are going to save a lot of performance because it's going to happen over there, and then you can get results back into the client so that the client doesn't have to do a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of back and forth in FileMaker, and they're trying to optimize that. With each new release, they make it better, but you still have to know as the developer what is going on. It's just like when we talked about today, okay, what happens if I get a found count of 0? Do I even need to continue? If you don't account for those types of situations, your scripts are wasting time doing things that they don't need to do, and they're doing them unnecessarily. So that's the best that I've got there. Will I be doing a lesson on dealing with preferences as you discussed? I will be putting in this database the method that I use, which is storing all of the preferences and then reading them in on startup. So that will be something I discuss. Hey, Matt, thanks for the awesome videos. I'm still watching the Series 3, but looking forward to the live ones. Thank you. Hello from Switzerland. All right. If finding related field, the find and omit are much slower. Not necessarily, Candido. How do I put this? A FileMaker find, its fastest is going to be on indexed fields. If you know you're doing search queries on index fields, FileMaker is extremely fast, even across record sets of millions of records. If you are doing a search on unstored fields, those are unstored calculations, or you can't search on summary fields, anything where FileMaker has to walk across every one of the possible records that are in the potential data set, that's going to be slower as opposed to going to the index. Also, there's multiple ways to solve the same problem. So for example, let's take a look at this. It's a good question, in fact. In here, we are doing we're performing a find where we want to return known results. When we know that we have known results, we have a couple of options. We can go in and remodify that find, which we did in today's lesson with a modify find. But also remember that we have a couple of other options when it comes to our finds. We can constrain a found set, and we can extend a found set. So these two steps that I've just put on screen in front of you, these are two different alternatives to, after we've got our found results, then narrowing that down. But what's happening is the exact same thing as what we just did. When we performed the initial find, a query was executed. Then we're just modifying that query with our own criteria right here. That's almost the same thing as perform the find, initiate the initial query, and then let's just constrain this found set. The difference here is we might be able to get away with fewer steps if we were to use, all of these steps are required. If I wanted to script this with a fewer steps, I might use the constrain found set right here and just modify it with the requests. And maybe I'll put that in, but I suggest if you want, look at these two script steps and see how they would be able to accomplish the same thing that we accomplished right here with these steps, and play with them. That's some good homework for today's lesson. All right, a few more questions and then we'll wrap up this video. No problem. Why is the error capture on the script while we don't handle any errors in the script? Very good question, Bart. The error capture on is there for the reason that when you execute a find, if it was not on and there was a 0 found set, FileMaker will return the dialog. We can take a look at that quickly. We will simply turn off the error capture right now. I know that project 6 has a 0 found set. We'll select project 6, and this is what comes up. FileMaker presents its own dialog unless we have the set error capture on, because as far as FileMaker is concerned, this is an error that no records were found. I don't know why it considers it an error, but this is FileMaker trying to be nice so that you use its UI and you say modify find. Well, in this, I can't even access some of the fields, like the excluding the start time. The start time isn't a field on this, and I'm intentionally not exposing certain data as fields. You can only see it as merge fields. So when we do this, when we turn on that set error capture, then of course, with that saved, when we go look for project 6, it just finds the 0 found set and never does that dialog. So good question. I'm glad that you asked. And let's see what else we've got. All right, last question today is, my suggestion is please tell us day before what will be in the next video so that we can prepare. I would love to do that, but you know what? I am unfortunately recording these just live, off the cuff, every day. I have no planned lesson. I just think, what do we need to do next in the database? And I just am discussing it. So I will have future videos where they will be pre-planned, but these live videos, I unfortunately don't know what I'm going to be talking about. In fact, you can see that I only post the description of the video on the YouTube page like maybe 10 minutes before I start recording the video. So there's not a whole lot of pre-planning going on in these, unfortunately. But I think that's going to give us our wrap for today. So, as always, I'm going to wish you much luck with your development, but before I do that, you can subscribe here on YouTube. Up above, you can go to FileMakerMagazine.com. Lots of more content there and great lessons. Subscribe too. Helps me out with the free videos here on YouTube. And next video in the series will come up right here. And again, much luck to you with your own FileMaker database. And until next time, happy FileMaking.